Don't, Harry. You have annoyed Dorian. He is not like other men. He would never bring misery upon anyone. His nature is too fine for that. Lord Henry looked across the table. Dorian is never annoyed with me, he answered. Now I ask the question for the best reason possible, for the only reason, indeed, that excuses one for asking any question. Simple curiosity. I have a theory that it is always the women who propose to us, and not we who propose to the women, except, of course, in middle-class life. But then in middle class, the middle classes are not modern. Pause. This is an interesting theory Lord Henry has, that it's really the woman who does the proposing. I'm going to say, in my life, at least my anecdotal experience, sure, my wife didn't propose to me, I proposed to her, but in the month before we got engaged, every time we walked by a jewelry store, she's like, ooh, jewelry, let's go in. And we'd look, and of course she'd look at rings. Now, my wife doesn't like jewelry. Since we've been married, she has pretty much gotten no jewelry and doesn't want it and doesn't ask for it, and openly says that it's a waste of money. What do you think she was doing in those jewelry stores? Yeah. She was proposing to me, according to Lord Henry, even though I'm the one who had to do the proposing at the end, and I think that's maybe true. Whatever. I don't like agreeing with Lord Henry. He's Satan, but again, like I said earlier, for him to be a good villain, he has to do things that are true, or say things that are true that affect the reader, so that we can buy some of what he says, but we always want to consider carefully what he's saying. Dorian Gray laughed and then tossed his head. You're quite incorrigible, Harry, but I don't mind. It is impossible to be angry with you. When you see Sybil Vane, you will feel that the man who could wrong her would be a beast without a heart. Is that foreshadowing? I feel like it's foreshadowing. I cannot understand how anyone can wish to shame the thing he loves. I love Sybil Vane. I want to place her on a pedestal of gold and to see the world worship the woman who is mine. What is marriage? An irrevocable vow? You mock at it for that? Ha! Don't mock. It is an irrevocable vow that I want to take. Her trust makes me faithful. Her belief makes me good. When I am with her, I regret all you have taught me. I become indifferent from what you have known me to be. I become different from what you have known me to be. I am changed, and the mere touch of Sybil Vane's hand makes me forget you and all your wrong, fascinating, poisonous, delightful theories. Pause. So this creates an opposition between Sybil and the way she's impacting Dorian to feel, which is romantic, and Lord Henry and all his intellectually immoral theories. Wrong, fascinating, poisonous, delightful theories. So that's interesting, the juxtaposition of the two influences, love and Lord Henry, on Dorian's psyche. And those are, asked Lord Henry, helping himself to some salad. Oh, your theories about life, your theories about love, your theories about pleasure. All your theories, in fact, Harry. Pleasure is the one thing worth having a theory about, he answered in his slow, melodious voice. But I am afraid I cannot claim my theory as my own. It belongs to nature, not to me. Pleasure is nature's test, her sign of approval. When we are happy, we are always good, but when we are good, we are not always happy. This is the new hedonism that Lord Henry talked about earlier. Your senses tell you what's right and wrong. If something's painful, it's wrong. If something's pleasurable, it's right. Your body is telling you to do it. It's like evolution and, Darwin. If it's pleasurable, we do it, and that, teaches us to do it more, and that's good for us evolutionarily or something like that. It's an interesting theory. But what do you mean by good? Cried Basil Hallward. Yes, echoed Dorian, leaning back in his chair and looking at Lord Henry over the heavy clusters of purple-lipped irises that stood at the center of the table. What do you mean by good, Harry? To be good is to be in harmony with oneself, he replied, touching the thin stem of his glass with his pale, fine-pointed fingers. And discord is to be forced to be in harmony with others. In one's own life, that is the important thing. As for the lives of one's neighbours, if one wishes to be a prig or a Puritan, one can flaunt one's moral views about them. But they are not one's concern. Besides, individualism is really the higher aim. Modern morality consists in accepting the standard of one's age. I consider that for any man of culture to accept the standard of his age is a form of the grossest immorality. Fancy logic that says morality is immoral and selfishness is good. That's weird. And of course, he takes a shot at Basil, too, saying one can flaunt one's moral views, but that makes one sort of immoral. That we shouldn't judge. I think that's interesting because here's Basil, always offering judgment, but Basil is theoretically the good character out of the two of them, and maybe not the more attractive character, though. But surely if one lives merely for oneself, Harry, one pays a terrible price for doing so, suggested the painter. Yes, we are overcharged for everything nowadays. I should fancy that the real tragedy of the poor is that they can afford nothing but self-denial. Beautiful sins, like beautiful things, are the privilege of the rich. One has to pay in other ways but money. What sort of ways, Basil? Oh, I should fancy in remorse, in suffering, in the consciousness of degradation. Lord Henry shrugged his shoulders. My dear fellow, medieval art is charming, but medieval emotions are out of date. One can use them in fiction, of course, but then the only things that one can use in fiction are the things one has ceased to use in fact. Believe me, no civilized man ever regrets a pleasure, and no uncivilized man ever knows what a pleasure is. I know what pleasure is, cried Dorian Gray. It is to adore someone. And that certainly is better than being adored, he answered, toying with some fruits. Interesting that Lord Henry's toying with fruits. Being adored is a nuisance. Women treat us just as humanity treats its gods. They worship us and are always bothering us to do something for them. Here's Lord Henry being anti-woman again. I should have said that whatever they asked for, they had first given to us, murmured the lad gravely. They create love in our natures. They have a right to demand it back. That is quite true, Dorian, cried Hallward. Nothing is ever quite true, said Lord Henry. This is, interrupted Dorian. You must admit, Harry, that women give to men the very gold of their lives. Possibly, he sighed, but they invariably want it back in such small change. That is the worry. Women, as some witty Frenchman once put it, inspire us with the desire to do masterpieces, and then always prevent us from carrying them out. Harry, you're dreadful. I don't know why I like you so much. You will always like me, Dorian, he replied. Will you have some coffee, you fellows? Waiter, bring coffee. And fine champagne. And some cigarettes. No, don't mind the cigarettes. I have some. Basil, I can't allow you to smoke cigars. You must have a cigarette. A cigarette is the perfect type of a perfect pleasure. It is exquisite, and it leaves one unsatisfied. What more can one want? Yes, Dorian, you will always be fond of me. I represent to you all the sins you have never had the courage to commit. Pause again. This is very much like a play. Are you hearing the dialogue? Even the action is carried through dialogue here by Lord Henry, and that's interesting. But let's take a look at the last bit here that Lord Henry throws at Dorian. I represent to you all the sins you have never had courage to commit. It makes sins a good thing. You have to have courage to be sinful. It's cowards who are pure. That contrast again. What nonsense you talk, Harry, cried the lad, taking a light from a fire-breathing silver dragon that the waiter had placed on the table. Let us go to the theater. When Sybil comes on the stage, you will have a new ideal of life. She will represent something to you that you have never known. Pause. One more thing. I mean, the juxtaposition here is real. Compare James's dinner with, like, the boiled meat and the flies and his mom in her tawdry dressing gown patching threadbare theatrical costumes. Compare that to these guys sitting around drinking champagne with fine evening capes and lighting their cigarettes from a lighter that's a silver dragon that breathes fire. I mean, come on. This is the contrast. How can somebody from this sphere be in love with somebody from that sphere? How is that relationship going to work out? This is the class differential that Oscar Wilde is highlighting by showing you the artistic elements of literally everything in these guys' lives and how they're reaching in Sybil's household for an artistic existence, trying to make it theatrical and failing every time. Anyway, I have known everything, said Lord Henry with a tired look in his eyes, but I am always ready for a new emotion. I am afraid, however, that for me, at any rate, there is no such thing. Still, your wonderful girl may thrill me. I love acting. It is so much more real than life. Let us go, Dorian. You will come with me. I am so sorry, Basil, but there is only room for 2 in the brougham. You must follow us in a hansom. So Basil has to take a taxi. Like Lord Henry picked a coach that only had 2 spots in it on purpose. They then got up and put on their coats, sipping their coffee standing. The painter was silent and preoccupied. There was a gloom over him. He could not bear this marriage, and yet it seemed to him to be better than many other things that might have happened. After a few minutes, they all passed downstairs. He drove off by himself, as had been arranged, and watched the flashing lights of the little brougham in front of him. A strange sense of loss came over him. He felt that Dorian Gray would never again be to him what he had been in the past. Life had come between them. His eyes darkened, and the crowded, flaring streets became blurred. When the cab drew up to the theater, it seemed to him that he had grown years older. That's the end of the chapter. So next chapter, Sybil's going to act. and we'll see how that works. Obviously, we're seeing the continued separation of Dorian from Basil as he goes more and more into Lord Henry's influence and more Lord Henry's camp. That's going to be important as the story continues on. So it was a short chapter, but I got it out there. I'll get another one out there for you tomorrow. Hopefully you're all happy and healthy and enjoying this beautiful weather that we've got going on. I'm going to sign off, and I will talk to you later.